Hey reader, welcome back to the channel. This is Centaur here. I am back from vacation, which means I have my microphone back. Woo! Yeah, you'll see me back here again in the setup. Hopefully sound quality has improved, and I'm very sorry again for forgetting. I need to just put it on my list of things to just put in my backpack the week before I go on a trip. Suffice it to say, the last few weeks we've been doing, basically just Centaur telling you how much the things you really love are not good. And so we're taking a quick break from that. Taking a quick break from that. And we're gonna go back to talking about special rules, but we're talking about positive special rules, the ones that I really like and that I think are really good this edition. They have always been, to some extent, really good in bolt action, but I think specifically in third edition, I think that these are very, very good. So the next few weeks, don't you worry, ones we're gonna talk about are awesome, and you'll feel good about them. Okay, so there's that. We're not all just Debbie Downer here on this channel. We're very happy, and as we approach American Thanksgiving, I thought it was just kind of nice to kind of end November on some happy notes as we look at things that everybody I'm pretty sure loves. Today we're talking about the Fieldcraft special rule. Now it's worth noting this is to some extent new from last edition. There were kind of units here and there that had it, but it wasn't present in the rule book as I recall, as kind of one of those kind of standardized sort of rules. And the theme behind this is a relatively simple thing. Fieldcraft is supposed to represent people who have received training, that's important, and are properly equipped for traversing various kinds of terrain. Most commonly in World War II, this took the form of mountain brigades, people who were very good at crossing over and working through difficult, mountainous sort of terrains, rocky terrains, as well as snow terrain being the other really, really common one. We find this rule on page 120, and you'll see it reproduced over there on the right-hand side. This right here, just by virtue of how you look at it, is probably going to make it a really good special rule in my book because it follows the KISS theory of game design very well. You will notice the entirety of the special rule can be reproduced in 3 lines, 1 sentence, and over half of that is theme to tell you what it's supposed to represent, right? The actual core mechanic is just the treat rough ground as open ground instead, right? Which is beautiful because it's easy to remember, it's easy to understand. There aren't nearly as many FAQ questions that will arise from something like this because of how easy it is to understand. And even though there was an FAQ about like, okay, so if you're running like through a ruin, when you're in a defensible position, a unit would get to, do their close combat swings first, and then the attacker would go elsewise. Does that get ignored by virtue of Fieldcraft? And the FAQ rightly says, no, you fight simultaneously because these guys, being so skilled in their Fieldcraft abilities, they're treating that rough ground, which is what would give you that defensive bonus, as open ground. Now, I guess if you had a stone wall that you were behind in a forest, right, or something like that, then that'd be a little bit different. But short of that, it means they would now fight simultaneously. And so a lot of questions are very easy to fix and they're easy to answer because the rule is so simple. And I just want to applaud the Warlord team for this because that's a very good game design. I'm a huge fan. Would that there were more things that were worded simpler about that. Just check out my video talking about the air observer if you want to see what that looks like in Centaur work. Because there are some places maybe where it could be tightened up more, but I think this is an excellent use of it here. Point cost for it is going to be +1 point per man. Most commonly, this is going to be on veteran troops, some regular troops, depending on the army that you're looking at. But it's not strictly limited by veterancy. The most common reason why we tend to find Fieldcraft on units that are regular or veteran is because, again, it's tied to rigorous training and the receiving of proper equipment. And very often, inexperienced troops are missing one or both of those. Okay, they might have really good equipment. The Volkssturm and the Volksgrenadiers are a really good example of this, right? Where you have really high-end equipment on an inexperienced unit. But very commonly, from a training perspective, that's what inexperienced units are supposed to represent. And so it is very rare that we see Fieldcraft on an inexperienced unit. However, as we'll talk about near the end of the video, I think there are a couple of niche situations where we could see inexperienced troops that get the benefit of Fieldcraft, but more on that a little bit later. So in terms of asking the question, does this special rule help? Because this is what dragged down things like Stubborn and Fanatics in the last few videos. Honestly, I think it's really good for a lot of reasons. The first and foremost is that you could run a dismounted infantry army, paying 1 extra point per man for a couple of squads that you need to push up, and you can get units that can run reliably through very difficult terrain that would slow down other armies, and thus you can make for a very quick breakaway to get to a far-flung objective or to chase down an objective that's being moved by the enemy in the case of something like, say, top secret or something like that, right? Or being able to get into position to contest something and possibly destroy it in the case of a scenario that is akin to demolition. When you compare this in cost to the cost of horses, 3 points per man, motorcycles, 5 points per man, bicycles, 1 point per man, but not giving you any benefit to your mobility unless you start and end on a road, and not every map gives you roads. And certainly if you're adding transports, which may cost you as little as 14 for 3 men, which is about 5 points per man, 20 to 25 points or so for a 8 to 12 man capacity, but relatively fragile, relatively easy to get rid of, and you're still paying about 2 to 3 points per man for each of those. When you look at it from a cost perspective, yes, you're still moving at like 12 inches, but it's a very reliable 12 inches. And the result is it can actually be better at giving you mobility over and against other stuff. Heaven forbid you should be playing on a Japanese board with tons of forest rough terrain all over the place, just dotting whole sections of the map. Moving through those with horses, from experience, not so simple. Moving through those with wheeled vehicles, also not so simple. In fact, might not even be possible at all realistically to make serious headway. But Fieldcraft, no problems whatsoever, which is excellent. It is also an effective means of bouncing through cover. So if you've, if you followed Bo Mortenson's channel and a couple of other channels, you'll see that Fieldcraft, what we mean by bouncing through is where you're pretty sure you're going to be attacked. And so in order to avoid being shot at, you just kind of move through rough terrain, in this case at a 12-inch rate, right? And as you move through that rough terrain, now you're fully obscured on the other side of it. They got to go all the way around it or go into it, in which case for the overwhelming majority of units, that's going to be an advance order in order to try to catch you. And if they want to shoot at you, it has to be an advance order, which means you're looking at 6 inches, maybe 9 inches in terms of movement in order to get to you. That is not very easy to do, right? And by chasing you and ending in the terrain, they've now opened themselves up to fire from your own units that might be on the opposite side of that rough terrain, right? So there's a lot of benefits from doing this. You can keep a unit, especially those 4-man spot tripping sort of units, those infiltrating-y sort of units. If you've got like an officer, maybe you took him veteran as a Gebersjäger, veteran officer for Germany, so you can get the extra snap twos. Maybe you take it as a small hit squad with a bunch of submachine guns in it. It could be kind of nice to be able to say, hey, things are getting a little bit tight over here. I don't want to lose my, morale +2 and my 3-man snap 2. I'm going to just pull them right behind this ruin. And now enemy's got to go all the way around to come get to me, and I have time to redeploy or hit them with other units if they try to do that. All of that is really, really good. There's also, it's just a great way to get into cover for safety, right? So, for example, the U.S. Rangers who get their free run move at the beginning of the game before anything starts, that's a fantastic option unless they want to end in a ruin, because you can't run into the ruin, right? Ruins are technically advance only. You can run, but you'd have to technically move at your 6-inch rate, right? Which maybe that works with Rangers, maybe it doesn't. It's the whole problem with how the whole bolt action thing is worded is. Regardless, I would have just changed the wording from advance only to no doubled movement. That's what I would have done, but that's neither here nor there. The important thing is this: a Fieldcraft unit can just decide, hey, I'm just going to run straight into that ruin, which is extremely rare. Most people don't do that. In fact, the overwhelming majority of armies so far don't even get Fieldcraft. Fieldcraft is extremely gated, right? I mean, with the Americans, we don't get any Fieldcraft at all, which I feel like that's an oversight. I've been pretty aggressive at saying that the U.S. Marine Corps should have been getting Fieldcraft and then, as a +1 bonus for their subtype, and then the ability to buy pistols that give them the assault keyword, or, give them tough fighters or something like that for an extra +1 point. I think that would be perfectly fine, because then you can decide which ones you want and how you like it. But currently, the Americans don't get it at all. The British have to pay for Chindis, which is veterans with an extra 3 points worth of upgrade on top of all of that. They have to really invest in order to get Fieldcraft reliably. Germans just got to buy infantry veteran, which they were, let's be honest, probably buying veteran in the first place anyway, just because you kind of wanted to be durable and survive, so that way your tank didn't do the job to help you out. And then depending on whether you're using heavy weapons or artillery for supporting fire, give them time to be able to shell away at the enemy. And so because of that, taking an extra 1 point upgrade to make them Gebersjäger is not a bad idea, right? It really works. And so, I tend to think when I look at this, it is a mobility thing that is also a defensive thing. And you're getting all that for only 1 point, which is fantastic. In my humble opinion, Fieldcraft is like the most underrated special rule in the new edition. It's the one that everybody thinks, okay, well, maybe that'll come up, maybe it won't. Here's the deal. When it comes up, it could win you the game. Okay? It could be the difference between winning and losing. And I'm not kidding you. There's a lot of different ways that it does that. Okay? So what units benefit the most from Fieldcraft? Because you don't need to buy it on everybody. Okay? First of all, push veteran units. If you have a veteran unit that has a bunch of submachine guns in it, Gepersjäger can take several. If you've got an officer unit that you wanted to bulk up to 5 models, 6 models, or something like that, and then throw a bunch of submachine guns on them, they can work really, really well for being able to move through and into terrain, being able to escape enemies that would like to shoot at them, being able to aggressively get into cover so that way they can cover an objective. And if you want to try to dig them out, feel free. But the submachine guns are coming after you after that happens. Very, very effective on SMG heavy veteran units. Cavalry units. We don't get a lot of them that get Fieldcraft. I'm saying wait because we'll see what the new books have coming out on account of I suspect Fieldcraft will play somewhere into the Japanese book, and it wouldn't surprise me if it plays into several of the other books. More on that as those come out. But suffice it to say, cavalry units that could perform an 18-inch run order without having to worry about rough terrain would be crazy good. And in as much as you can get cavalry units that can get Fieldcraft, they are fantastically good. Okay. Artillery that intend to be able to move in and out of a ruin are also really good. Let's say that you have a howitzer or an anti-aircraft gun, and you decide you're going to deploy it in a ruin. Typically, that means they're stuck, which means mortars are going to have a field day just trying to range in on you, and it's just going to be a ticking time bomb until either you remove them or they eventually hit you, right? And in as much as that's the case, it is really nice when they start getting to a 5+ to hit, 4+ to hit. If for whatever reason you felt like there was another thing you just really needed to remove, you remove it on your turn, you feel good. They miss again and now they're looking for a 3+. It's really nice when you can move those things out of rough terrain. And thus, if you're going to take a recoilless gun as a Gepersjäger gun, for example, for the Germans, being able to take them as a Fieldcraft unit with the Gepersjäger upgrade is really nice for doing counter battery fire against the enemy and then evading their counter battery fire on you after you've done your job. You then have support teams that are intended to push up. So, for example, over here on the right-hand side, you see a Chindit anti-tank rifle team. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of paying for this only because it's a lot of points to spend. It's almost 40 points to spend on an AT rifle, which I don't generally tend to do. A lot of other people, including Tiberius, who's in my gaming group, and you'll see some of his comments sometimes on some of the videos, he's really sold on it, and I understand why, and it makes a lot of sense, especially since Chindits are also a very effective outflanking unit, and so you can outflank them, advance them into a ruin or something else like that, and start shooting at people as early as turn 3, and then on the next turn, you can run out of it, which most people cannot do, a full 12 inches potentially to get into another or behind another piece of cover. So that way you can contest objectives with something that's relatively cheap by comparison to a rifle section. It can also be really effective on machine gun teams because machine gun teams might be one of those units where you set them up in cover and you want to be able to fire on stuff and then people start trying to shoot at you. So then you want to kind of redeploy and move elsewhere while still then being able to do a base of fire. Being able to move your full 12 inches is really, really nice. And then finally, infiltrators that may need to redeploy can be a very effective way to use Fieldcraft. Now, again, these are extremely rare right now, but in as much as we can get access to infiltrating Fieldcraft units, that is a very powerful combo. More on that next week when we talk about infiltrators, okay? So what units should have Fieldcraft? We don't currently have Fieldcraft, I don't think, anywhere in the Get You by PDFs. Which is weird because over there on the right-hand side, we have the Alpini mountain troops from Italy, which effectively had Fieldcraft in the last edition, but at least last I checked on the Get You by PDF, they do not have Fieldcraft. And I feel like that's an oversight. And I have reason to believe that's going to be fixed in, 6 months? Possibly less than that when we end up getting the Italian book. So I'm happy, and I look forward to seeing that next, in next quarter. But suffice it to say, at least for now, I think there are some armies that could use Fieldcraft. And so I just went, by order, alphanumerically for each nation. to talk through, at least from my research, which nations should have Fieldcraft units. And then we'll just cross-check those against the books to see what happens, okay? Looking first from the Commonwealth, Australian troops should have some sort of Fieldcraft unit of some way, shape, or form. They did an awful lot of jungle fighting. They were very effective at it. They had extensive training on that before they ended up going through the rest of the Pacific campaign. So I would love to see some of those have Fieldcraft. I think New Zealand units should also have those, possibly Indian units as well through their work in Burma. All of these nations both had dedicated, especially mountain or jungle training programs, and they fielded them to perform those kinds of maneuvers during the war. So I think they should all have them. We will see what the new Commonwealth book has when that one drops. Finnish units. There should be multiple Finland options for Fieldcraft, because if you want to talk about use of skis and mountain tactics and mountain warfare and redeployment and stuff like that, I mean, the Finns were doing that even before World War II with the Winter War. So I feel like they should be present. They currently don't even have large amounts of access to inexperienced troops, so I feel like it should definitely be present. They had training. It should be there, okay? Border defense units were present for the Greeks, especially along the Metaxas line and that northern border. Heading into it, they did extensive fighting against the Italians on their northern border, quite successfully, actually. And were only really driven out once the Germans started bringing in really, really, really heavy shelling capability to kind of drive them out of their defensible positions. So I feel like Greeks should have some sort of border defense unit that gives them Fieldcraft. Check out that in the Zern mission pack if you want to see. We've got a couple of options for that. Hungary fielded multiple mountain divisions, very effective mountain positions, which is not particularly surprising. They have the Carpathian Mountains right there. And it's been a part of Hungarian defense since a very long time ago. So I feel like Hungary should also have some sort of Fieldcraft unit. The Alpini infantry that you see on there on the right-hand side should be present for Italy. Japan, I think, should have a lot of units that should have Fieldcraft. In fact, I would be inclined to make it a subtype. And that way you can have some infantry units that can take that subtype. You would also then have some support teams. You'd have officer teams. You'd have some artillery teams, especially the mountain guns that they fielded as well. Some of those battalion gun sort of things as well. I feel like that would be a great option for Fieldcraft. Border guard units for Norway. This is, again, one of the nations that gets overlooked, and right now they don't have hardly anything. In last edition and currently in the PDF, they had like inexperienced infantry, regular infantry, veteran royal guards, and there's even some discrepancy right now between the app and the Get You by PDF as to whether those royal guard units can be taken as more than 5 men. Currently, Get You by PDF, only 5 men. App, up to 11. Who can say? They're both official warlord publications. I'd love to think that they can take more than 5 veterans at a time. I feel like there's room for a 4th unit. I don't think that's asking for too much, personally. And that being the border guard units for Norway that were stationed all along various mountainous areas. Did not see a lot of fighting because overwhelmingly the Germans came in by sea. But they did have them. They were involved in training, so I think we can represent them with units in the game, personally, okay? Poland had a number of mountain divisions, not particularly surprising, as there is some pretty substantial mountainous terrain on Poland's borders. Romania had mountain divisions, quite heavily used in preparation for the attack on Sevastopol. So, there's a lot of stuff going on there in Eastern Europe that we haven't seen a lot of in the game to date, and I think would be a nice bump for armies like Romania and Poland from keeping them from being too bland, where it's basically, here's your cavalry, Poland pretty good, for Romania kind of and then here's your infantry, they come in a couple of different varieties, inexperienced, regular, veteran, have some fun. I feel like we can diversify them a little bit more, okay? And then finally, and again, I said this earlier, so I won't harp on it too much, U.S. Marine Corps, my humble opinion, should probably have it, okay? Now, you'll notice the army I didn't mention here, and that is the most recent army of the Soviet Union. I went back to the Soviet Union book. As far as I can tell, they don't have any Fieldcraft units. And my gut tells me it's kind of true, because they didn't have a lot of dedicated training programs for mountain terrain specifically. That being said, one, we already have ski troops, and that's super niche. So I feel like maybe they have to pay an extra point, optional or not, to get Fieldcraft, but I feel like there's an option there. This could also be a really great place for Siberian veterans to help make them feel a little bit different than just It's another infantry section, but they can go up to 12 men instead of 10 or 11 men. And they can all take submachine guns, which is really nice. And you can pay tough fighters for +1 point if you'd prefer to save some points and not take a bunch of SMGs. You just want rifles, but you want them to be durable in a fight. Like I feel like there's options there for kind of customizing. I feel like that could be really good. Related to that, kind of something we were mentioning earlier, I feel like there's room for cavalry fieldcraft options coming from Far Eastern Mongolian sort of troops. I don't know that I give it to Cossacks just because Cossacks are already ignoring obstacles. And if it's ignore obstacles and rough terrain, as somebody who plays cavalry a lot and loves cavalry, that's pretty powerful. Okay. So I think I'd be careful about that. But similarly, I feel like there's room for maybe partisan cavalry or something like that to be able to do something like that, to again reflecting the fact that not every uprising was a Parisian uprising. That's an urban development. You had people standing up to the Soviet Union, standing up to Germany, occupying forces in the Balkan areas, with the spread of the Italian forces and Bulgarian forces. And a lot of those people would have been very used to rugged terrain. And so I feel like some sort of partisan subtype could also be really nice. That could give these guys the Fieldcraft upgrade and would help to make, again, partisans feel a little more like, oh yeah, this is my specific partisan unit that is rising up in this particular part of the world. And I think that could be very, very useful. Okay. But that's it. That's the whole video, right? I mean, I think Fieldcraft is really good. I think that you could do a whole lot worse paying 1 point per man for another, for any upgrade at all in the game other than Fieldcraft. I mean, like Fieldcraft is just, it helps to streamline your efficiency quite a bit. It can save you a lot of money on having to buy transports or buying upgrades that improve the rate of speed of your infantry. There are quite a few people who want to include rough terrain in some way, shape, or form just because they don't want wheeled vehicles to just, run units clean off the board when doing something like envelopment. And so they want to have something there that kind of breaks up the movement and forces people to move around stuff. I think that can be really effective. And so being able to maintain a good solid rate of movement is quite powerful. And so I would highly recommend it to you if you're looking for a new way to diversify and you're one of the few armies that can actually take Fieldcraft. You might consider maybe you don't take Spotropen infiltrators. Maybe you take a small unit of Geber's Jaeger and you use them to move up the board to do that deep strike capability against the enemy. Maybe you'll find that works better. If you like these thoughts, let us know down below. If you don't like these thoughts, also let us know down below. Maybe Fieldcraft in your mind is just a waste because you always play on a Paris board and it's a Paris before it has a bunch of ruined buildings in it. And so because of that, you're never going to see it. Fair enough. Maybe you play on really, really dense Southeast Asian boards all the time. And so if you don't run Fieldcraft, you're basically throwing away the game. Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.